All right. Good morning. Again, I'm Rusty Grice. I'm with Auburn University Shellfish Lab. I'm an extension specialist and I'm an aquaculture business specialist, no science involved. So um, if you got a microphone there, you can turn it on. We'll just do some quick introductions.
Hello, I'm Thomas Piecuch, sorry, and oyster farmer in Mississippi, and formerly a fisheries biologist. Started oyster farming in Mississippi 4 years ago.
My name is Jacob Aparicio. I'm with the Oyster Bros. My background is petrochemical, shrimping. I came from a third generation shrimping industry, and we have about 17 acres on the Matagorda Bay system that we're farming right now.
Eli Kirshtein with Inland Foods based out of Atlanta. I'm a recovering chef and now on the distribution side, handling all the food and business development stuff for us.
Chris had practicing natural scientist for my day job, partner in Admiral Shellfish Company, and partner in North Gulf Farms, processing and seafood.
Hello, I'm Tom Bliss. I'm with the University of Georgia Marine Extension Georgia Sea Grant and work out of Savannah, Georgia, run our shellfish research laboratory. So a lot of the things Rusty and I wanted to get this panel up here for is really some of the questions we get as extension agents, but really wanted to get feedback and from the perspective of growers. And so, because you guys don't always have the chance to meet growers from different areas, so we thought this would be a great way to, help get that conversation going with growers, giving feedback to growers.
Okay, so I ordered extra microphones, so don't be shy. You can use one. Yeah, grab one. So in my role, I get calls from folks that are interested in starting an oyster farm or shellfish farm. And usually at the top of the list is the question about the market. Which way is the market going? And full disclosure, we don't need price information or what you're seeing or anything like that. So that's what we'd like to know. Is the pie getting bigger? Are we seeing more restaurants, more oyster markets? And Eli, I'll let you.
I can jump on that. It is a constantly growing market. We're seeing greater and greater demand for, oysters with a specific story, with an origin. That is something people want. My biggest advice kind of in that strike zone is, make sure you've kind of gotten to critical mass, because, once it's gotten to somebody like my team, we're not able to sell 300 a week. We're not able to sell 1,000 a week. We need volume. That's kind of the big push. There's a huge demand for that once we can kind of put it into our supply chain. Yeah, for sure.
And Chris, just some thoughts from your experience in the Mobile Bay area.
There's a demand for volume, but the farmer's brand doesn't always hold to that volume. So there's been product that's been rebranded, and I kicked myself in the butt for a product that was rebranded that we missed the opportunity on. It was a guaranteed sale of a large quantity annually. And it was also a price margin as well. So we would have to reduce our price and allow our brand. But we were new to the company and new to the area. And we were like, we're married to this brand. We've got to build our brand. And we held true to that. Well, guess what? We missed out on it. It was a great sale, and it's still going on. And the farmer that has it, he does very well with it. But for us, it was a learning experience because we've got a large volume of oysters that we have to sell, and it may not be our brand that's selling that product, but in the end, we're in the market of selling oysters. We don't have the 3, 4, and 5 generation farms that some of these West Coast farms have and Northeast farms that have that brand. So right now, we might have 2 million oysters in the water and only have the brand capability of selling 750,000 to 1 million. So what do we do with that other million? We have to adjust, maybe reduce our price, and allow somebody else to rebrand that if we want to move that product. And that's where Ian and his company come in, and companies like Inland and Evans and J&B and some of the others.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, private labeling It's also such a huge thing for us now. People wanting to be able to have exclusivity in the markets. If you've got a restaurant that's moving volume, being able to give them, a bespoke program it goes really, really far and it helps move volume. I've seen people have the same oyster on their menu with two different names. And they have no quarrels about that.
Ian knows, only Ian,
It's Eli,
or
by the way.
Eli, sorry. Only Eli knows that and the distributor knows that, but us as the farmer, half the time, we don't know where our product goes unless we have that direct connection with a chef.
And Thomas, you are owner operator, and talk about your business model and how you've developed your market.
Thank you.
Developing the market was kind of tough coming in. You make these plans. We got lucky in coming to Oyster South, making connections with people, getting hooked up with our distributor. The majority of our sales are wholesale. You come out, you try to do direct marketing. The fellow, what was his name from Louisiana yesterday that had the talk in the morning about the Dan? Yeah, that was like a very, very interesting talk, and I felt very related to that. Because in Mississippi, now we've got a bunch of smaller farmers coming in locally. Everybody's trying to compete with each other. So trying to develop a business model, and you realize like our local market, it's not really going to be able to sustain all these direct sales and try to get them shipped out of town and to, the high end raw bars and the Southeast region was kind of our target, and we were able to hit that.
Yeah, Dan the economist.
Dan the man.
So Jacob, talk about, we're interested in the shrimping industry and how that has evolved, and then getting started in shellfish farming, and then I guess selling in probably into Houston and larger markets like that.
Yes, sir. So for us, shrimping is three generations in it. We got into oyster farming by two great guys from Texas, Mario Marquez and Rob Hine. They kind of pushed us along to help us to get started. I want to give a big shout out to those two guys. As far as our market goes, Palacios is a unique town. We got redfish farms, we got catfish farms, striped bass. I mean, it's a big seafood town. For our sale point for us to get on with one of these distributors it's kind of a sell point in itself. Hey, you are coming to Palacios. We're here in Palacios. We've kind of been fortunate enough to be a seafood town, and it's worked out for us.
Cool. Eli, just a few years that I've been around, I've noticed sort of a change in the size of the market,
Yeah.
size of the oysters in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
market. Can you talk a little bit about what y'all look for?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're actually looking for variety. When we have a customer, an oyster bar coming to us, they want differentiation to a certain extent. What's the different offering? It's awesome when you find places that have 20, 30 varieties on a menu. But if somebody's only going to offer one or two, or they want to separate where appellations are from, things like that, they want some cold water, they want a Gulf, they want an East Coast. They want to be able to give their servers talking points where they can say, this is a medium-sized oyster and one or two little flavor notes. Size makes a big difference, and it gives you some market differentiation. Super familiar that the cost kind of goes up as the oyster size goes down a little bit. But I do think that there is a market demand for that cocktail size oyster. People pay a premium for things like Kumamotos, Kushis, and Shigokus, and that sort of thing. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity in that part of the market.
So we talked a little bit about branding. Any other thoughts for we move on to a couple of other topics in the industry on branding? All right. So usually, so I did a workshop. I see Hope over there Monday night, and I have about 90 slides I go through, and I think I got to the second slide, Hope, and she said, "What about mortality?" I was like, "Okay, calm down. What's the percentage? I need a percentage." So we're talking about a business plan where somebody's just starting out. They got a year, perhaps, to get a permit, another year, 6 months to get gear and get it installed, another year maybe to get to market size. So you're trying to predict the future, and you need to put in a percentage. And Bill talked a little bit about some phenomenon that's going on. So as a business person and a farmer, is there even like a rule of thumb you use, or are you just throwing numbers at it, Chris, or how do y'all guesstimate?
Initially, we came into this with a 10% mortality rate. We found that it's closer to 20. We try and get the oyster off the farm as quick as possible, hence that cocktail oyster, that 2.5 to 3 inch margin. That allows us to often move 10%, let's say 10% of our oysters off the farm within 4 months. So we've got a very high growth rate in our area. It's a warm water oyster, so it's growing fast. We buy at R6. We don't have we're not vertically integrated, so we're buying at R6, and it might take 4 to 6 months for half our farm to move, but that's what we want. But like Eli said, there's variability in the market for size. So we also understand that. So we grow a little bit larger oyster, and at North Gulf, they're seeking a little bit larger oyster to offer that variety for a one-stop shop for the distributors.
Thomas, mortality.
Mortality. So kind of to reiterate what Chris said, when we're doing our projections, we get ours from R6 to market usually in about 6 months. Conditions can make that vary. And we use a 20% off the top. If we get 100,000 seed, to make it easy on the math, it's like, all right, we're going to get 80%, 80,000 from this. And we use that kind of as the way to schedule and manage our weekly production.
Got you. So Jacob, I know that y'all had a little bit of an event around the storm. Was it last summer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what was that experience like?
We had Hurricane Beryl hit us our second season in, and it's gear was fine. We lost a little bit, but mortality was real high. So we lost a bunch of seed during that, a bunch of crop during that. A lot of stuff that we had planted before Beryl that we were kind of hoping to be on board for, our oyster season in Texas kind of got wiped out. So we saved some, and then we were able to, still produce quite a bit, but it wasn't what we wanted. So as far as mortality, ours was a lot higher. It's hard for me to get an actual number. So hopefully this year going in, so far everything's looking good, low mortality, and hopefully have a good year and know more or less where our industry is going to be.
And so this is a little plug for our folks at the USDA Risk Management Agency. They were unable to travel, had a booth and a session plan. So if you're a commercial farmer, probably need to register a farm with your county office, please, and have opportunity to take advantage of some of the, not only insurance programs, but the disaster relief programs for storms and things like that. How many thoughts on mortality now that you're managing a hatchery?
A hatchery. We're Georgia's new, so we just have a couple farms that have been in a few years. So we're still getting a handle on what our mortality is. Right now we're seeing a little bump in the spring and early summer, but not to a really high limit yet. But we just don't have enough time to really be able to see what the trends are in farms. We have some idea from past research experiments where we've had really low mortality, but we just don't have the sites or the time frame to really know what's going on. But it does seem to be ephemeral, based on guys that I've talked to in South Carolina and elsewhere, that they do have periods. And one thing that's unique for us that I don't know if it caused a lot of mortality, but it did cause a lot of problems with fouling, which can definitely be a problem for mortality. But there's a invasive mussel that shows up in Georgia and South Carolina called Mitella, and at times in the late summer, early fall, we'll get a heavy set of that, and that will clog up your bags really fast. So that's something that we're concerned about, that 10 years ago wasn't really a big problem that we knew much about, and now we're seeing it creep up more. So.
Okay, so while you've got the microphone, and we work around the country in different states, and the topic of permitting comes up. So if somebody's new and they come to Georgia and they're like, I'd like to start a farm, tell me about your permitting process.
Yeah, so our permitting's a little different for floating farms. So the state of Georgia has taken the approach to pre-permit mariculture zones, and then those zones are opened up by our state through a lottery system. And so you just fill out a 1 to 2 page application. It's very straightforward. And then it's based on preference points that are assigned based on how you answer the questions. And based on that, you get awarded the lease if you're lucky enough. Our state's very slow in doing that, but probably about every other year, 3 leases have been coming open. And then after that, you get a deal with the Army Corps, and that state of Georgia is very slow. So we're hoping our course speeds up soon.
Like a general timeline is how many months?
Army Corps permit, anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Chris, share your journey with us, please.
Had a journey. So we have an oyster park in Alabama. It's on the western side of the bay. And I've always been a firm believer in site selection, location, 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 just like every other business. My wife and I started looking on the eastern side of the bay, and we had 2 attributes we were looking for: a hard sandy bottom, so we didn't want to deal with mud, and also high salinity. We happen to be neighbors to Navy Cove, who have an amazing spot. They're 2 miles to our east, and we're the only 2 farms on the eastern side of Mobile Bay. Everybody else is on the western side of the bay. So we start working on our permitting. We have to go through the Corps, much like they do, and it's actually the Mobile office that helps the Savannah office in Georgia. And that's probably why their process is slowed down a little bit more, because I've dealt with the Mobile office in my day job as well as in oyster farming. Anyway, they do have statute of limitations, so hold them to that. So go through the Corps, DCNR. And our core permit is actually a nationwide permit. And yesterday, whenever we were listening to the topsail folks having to do an individual, I cringed. I can only imagine how bad that was. And I hate it that anybody has to go through that, because we had a neighbor that bought the property after we purchased the property to start an oyster farm, and tried to make public comment toward our farm against our farm. Well, guess what? In a nationwide permit, there's no public comment period. The only way that I found that out was pulling out a Freedom of Information and saw that she did it. I called her directly and laughed at her and said, good luck. So we go through the Corps. DCNR comes out, looks at the water bottom. State Lands has a say-so in it. That's who we inevitably lease the bottom from. We go back to the Corps. We go to ALEA, Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and they look at whether or not it's a recreational hazard. We're in a kind of a cove area, and they said there is potential risk for recreational hazard. So we thought, we're going to mitigate this with proper signage and buoys and markers and make sure that there's no recreational hazard here. Well, that word potential stopped us for almost a year. So it took us nearly 3 years just to get a permit, until luckily we were able to reach out to our director of DCNR, who made the contact to the director of ALEA and said, change your verbiage. This is going to happen. They changed their verbiage the next week, and we had a permit within a month. So meet your DCNR people. I think Topsail was talking about, or NC was talking about that yesterday. Get to know your local regulators, and yeah, you have to be a proponent of it, but it was a nightmare. We didn't think it was ever going to work. And hell, I thought we had the most pristine, easiest access place in the state of Alabama. And we just were afraid it would never work, but inevitably it did. But it took us 3 years.
You didn't mention the Maritime Archaeological
Oh,
Survey.
2 maritime archaeological surveys. There was a piece of concrete 300 yards off of our farm, so we had to pay somebody to go down and dive and say, yep, you got a piece of concrete over here. And then we also had to have some shovel tests, which is fine because we're 3/4 of a mile from Fort Morgan, and it is what it is. So it's just money and time. That's it.
Jacob, have you been involved in permitting, or is that the little brother assignment and the Oyster Bros?
Well, we both, David kind of headed off permit number 3, which Texas was new to it. So everybody was learning on that one. So everybody learned on that one. But 13, it probably took us about a year and a half to get. In Texas, we got to do a permit with TPWD, Texas GLO, and the Army Corps, and then a U.S. Coast Guard survey, and a TCEQ permit, which we don't have no outfalls or nothing, but we have a TCEQ permit as well. So, the process, it was a process, but I can't say it wasn't too bad. I mean, Mario there, a bunch of other guys there to kind of help along the way. You know, I think ours went fairly smooth. I mean, but I think we got lucky with it being very new too as well.
And Thomas, you're in a little bit of a unique.
Yeah,
area.
we have had usually the opposite experience with permitting in Mississippi. So we have a pre-permitted aqua park. We go through a year-long training course hosted by the state. They give you a test run of gear, 10,000 oysters, 10 cages, and you do that for a year on your own. You come back around at the end and you say, yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do this. And you have the option to continue, and you can sell those oysters as your little seed money, and then you will make the choice of if you want to continue farming or not. And we still have to get certain certifications from various state organizations. But other than that, the regulators in Mississippi really made it easy on us, and they've been champions for us. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I don't know if they've made it in this morning, but some of the Mississippi folks are here.
We got one. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so with that, the other topic that I'm all, as part of your business plan is how much is your lease fee per acre per year?
Ours per acre per year is it's slowly going up. It's $96, I think, per acre per year in Mississippi.
Go ahead, Jake.
Actually, ours has come down. So it was GLO was $1,500 an acre, and I think we're down to 500. And we got to pay TPWD. Can't remember what the first one was, but I think it's 450 an acre. So,
And
then we got to pay a $250 TCEQ permit fee every year as well.
okay, Chris, you remember yours?
250.
Okay, that's for state lands in Alabama.
That's for state lands in Alabama, which technically I own half of our farm because we've eroded so much. So I shouldn't be paying lease on it, but that's another battle. What, the price? I do not.
Well, it was like, it was more than that, but there was also like a 6% royalty. Yeah, we're not doing that.
And the Oyster Park, I believe, has their lease is much higher. Am I correct?
Well, they have a maintenance fee on top of it just for not fixing the lights, but, Tom, do you know the lease rates in Georgia?
I can't remember offhand, but Ernest, do you know what your lease fee is per acre? There you go.
So the takeaway is it varies quite a bit,
Yeah.
as does the permit process, but
Yeah.
unless it's pre-permitted, it's going to be time and money, as Chris said. So,
Yeah.
all right. So my next favorite topic is seed availability. So I was in an interesting conversation with Jim, and he's like, we need to get together and move the seed and do the things. And I was like, Bobby was trying to bail me out. And yeah, moving live animals with unknown consequences is part of the mix. So Thomas, seed availability, is that a non-factor or a part?
No, it's something that we have to take into consideration every year. The first couple years getting going, at times there were bottlenecks, and I'm like, I got to get more seed on the farm now. You start making calls and you get a mixed bag, but at the end of the day, we've always been able to get it. Luckily, we now have a guy at Magnolia Key Oyster Company. They're not here; they're Oyster South members, but they have a hatchery, a nursery, and they're using local genetics, and they're scaling up as we're scaling up, which is nice. So I've always got a very good source of seed locally, which is a pretty important aspect of having a quality oyster.
And Jacob, you want to talk a little bit about the seed regulations in Texas?
I mean, everything in Texas has to be a Texas broodstock. So Magnolia Key works with us. We've got triplets from them. We've got some from Maine. Thankful to have Jim in our backyard to get diploids. I mean, seed has been getting better. The first couple of years, it's like you take what you can get. If it's there, you take it. And it's gotten better. This year we're able to actually plan out a seed buying program with our farm. So, it's only getting better from here.
And Chris?
We've gotten it from anywhere we can, except for the East Coast. We have not gotten it from the East Coast. we've been as far down as South Florida. That was a tough one to work with. So luckily Terry Boyd at Magnolia Key has really ramped it up, and we're actually going to help him ramp that up, not just for us, but for people like Thomas and other farmers in the area, because we all benefit from having seed availability. And we don't want seed in June for our first plant. We want to start planting in February, March, April, as soon as possible. And hopefully we'll be able to accomplish that this year or next year. But yeah, seed availability is one of the key things. Without seed, we don't have oysters, and here we are just staring at water.
Any thoughts on the East Coast over there, Tom, about?
At least in where we are, our industry is still small and growing. So right now we're able to produce and sell seed. So we've been supplying East Coast of Florida up through South Carolina. But most of those farms get seed from other hatcheries as well. So we're helping meet some of that need, but our goal is really to be there for farmers as they're starting, because they want that lower seed amount typically, so we can help them in that respect. So, but I see it becoming a problem as we get more leases on up and running in the southeast in that area of the South Atlantic Bight. So it's a problem because in Georgia there is no commercial hatcheries. And in South Carolina there's only one, but it's a very limited market. They're more vertically integrated. So we're definitely in that Georgia, South Carolina area seed limited. So we do rely on out of state seed.
Yeah, so some growing pains there
Yeah.
as well. So, Eli, you want to talk about, you've heard a lot from industry. What are the things in your world as at Inland that keep you, up at night a little bit, or go
Sure.
bump in the night, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, restaurants, just like they're in consumers, really want consistency. They want to be able to walk in the door and get the same thing every single time. So as y'all are also susceptible to weather and any other whim that you can think of, it's always difficult for us to communicate to our customers when things aren't available. That's always a continual rub. That's the thing for us. And then also logistics, I mean, getting from point A to point B and how that works, and piggybacking on things is always rough. And I think, kind of the third thing, and it's kind of I don't know, I guess a piece of advice, whether it be for us or anybody else, we recommend until, you're up in a lot of volume to just kind of, stick with the girl you came with, find one distributor and really like just hone in on that until you grow. It only cannibalizes. And we've seen that struggle, if you go to us and you go to another distributor, you go to a third distributor, we're all out just undermining each other on cost and price. And then you start getting into shellfish tag dates and all that fun stuff. So until you've got significant volume, making sure to really just hone in on one partner, really building that supply chain out. Those are our biggest touch points, I think.
Yeah, so you mentioned a supply chain. So we were talking a little bit yesterday, and in the workshop I do, got a little cartoon characters like the one you see here. But one of them's like the supply chain from the farm to face, like it's everybody's got to be successful along that supply chain. And with that is opportunity and that, in fact, you mentioned logistics. So the slide I use, the one you see there, does anybody recognize the movie or the character from the movie? Sarah, you can't say anything because you've seen this like 7 times. Anyone? That's Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, which is came out about 20 years ago. And the point I used this slide for is this was back when we used to go to Blockbuster when my girls were little. And at the Blockbuster, you could go in and they had these boxes, and every box had a movie. And you would rent a movie and it had a tape in it. And you would take tape home and you could have that for like 4 days for $8. And it was great until everybody fought about what movie to get. And then Tuesday, you got to go take the movie back. And if you didn't rewind it, they got really mad. And then they would fine you if you were late. So, of course, then Netflix came along. And back in those olden times, they had these things called DVDs, and they would mail you a DVD. And so you could keep it as long as you want to. and they wouldn't fine you, you paid a subscription, a monthly fees, right? So they were getting it to the consumer in a much more efficient way. And then, of course, now it's streaming online, so you just pay the ever increasing subscription fee and enjoy, all you can eat kind of model. So the point is that I use in that it took roughly about 8 years when Netflix started for Blockbuster to go bankrupt. And it was just it was just how you got your product from here to there. So, and when you're moving oysters, it's a unique challenge. So Chris, your thoughts?
I wanted to go back to the supply chain question that we were just talking about. So let's say we sell you guys 5,000. We might have 100,000 in back stock. So what do we do with that 100,000? We hold on to that 100. Let's say you're moving 5,000 a week for me. I'm just throwing this out there. You're moving 5,000 a week for me. All right, I've got 100,000 that are at market size. I have to go with multiple distributors to start moving that product, or else I'm going to lose that cocktail size oyster.
You've got the volume. You've got
Correct.
enough volume to
I've
do
got
it,
enough.
so that works.
Right. But if I'm just using me as an example, let's say inland carries 30 different farm raised oysters. We're all getting a little piece, but you can't provide and I'm not saying inland can't, that single sole source distributor cannot provide the necessary sales for that farmer who has that volume. So contrary to, and I'm not saying this, we have to have multiple distributors and multiple. So now don't find distributors that are selling to the same exact restaurants. Like you said, you don't want to have a battle for pricing, but you want to get your product as far away. I don't care if we saturate our market. I don't want to saturate the market that I farm in. I do want a couple restaurants and let it be. Everybody else can fight over the other local restaurants, but I want the product to get as far away from where I'm farming as possible. And it takes multiple distributors to do that. So that's why I hope I didn't grimace whenever you said that, but I mean,
Yeah.
I use the multiple distributors and get it as far away as possible.
Yeah, like I said, you've got to that volume thing. And it's also a question of what distributors can get their tentacles in where. That's correct. Obviously inland's very heavy in Atlanta. There's other people who are heavier in, places like Birmingham, or if you're going to go west towards, Texas and places like that. It's just we found that when there's people who don't have the volume, and they're shorting orders that we're putting in, it's never about them calling us and saying, I've got too many, you need to take more. It's always hey, I don't have you this week. That's a problem.
Too many. You need to take more.
We should have a conversation.
Um,
Yeah, I'm a lot like Chris as well. We kind of hold a larger volume, but we have out bigger oysters in Texas. Cocktails is like our challenge right now, but we're getting through it. But the bigger oysters, Texas got some market.
And that seems like the market is going toward a bigger oyster. We sell a lot of cocktail size oysters, 2.5 to 3 inch margin, but it seems like the majority of the requests are actually that 4 inch and larger margin. And it works out because guess what? We can't sell 100,000 a week of the 2.5 inch. So they're going to sit on the farm and continue to grow.
and Thomas, being an owner operator, I know you've got a little bit of a unique setup too with your trails. Talk about that.
Yeah, we are able to direct market in Mississippi, and to get to a processor, there's wasn't really a very good local one that could come pick up, or somebody that comes and picks it up from you. A lot of these processors that come in to do pickup, they want their product to be already chilled and refrigerated. So when we're harvesting in Mississippi, the harvest times don't end. It's mechanical refrigeration. So we took a while and figured out we became our own dealer and processor of oysters. And like at our dock, we have a refrigerated trailer that I keep right there. If you've seen any of my Instagram videos, it's probably in there. And the product goes straight from the boat into there, meet the chill time requirements, sits overnight. The truck comes and picks it up the next morning, and they're off to wherever they end up going.
The old mechanized refrigeration requirements.
Mechanical refrigeration.
So, and unique to Mississippi is the ability to sell at the dock, right?
Correct. Yeah. Some other states in the surrounding areas, they don't have a very good, or they don't allow direct marketing. I don't know about Texas. Chris, if I believe Alabama, you still can't sell directly. They have to go through a processor. So we have the ability.
I didn't hear. So,
Oh, you can.
okay, good. But you can't cross state lines without having the,
Yes. So if we were to, use our trailer to make our deliveries, you can't cross state lines without mechanical refrigeration. And the permitting state by state depends on if you have a seafood dealer's permit in that state or this state or who you're selling to. So trying to keep all those lines straight was a challenge at first. And I think we kind of got to the bottom of it for the most part, at least regionally, east and west.
right, so it's the most highly regulated food product there is. So
Correct.
there's that. Tom, your thoughts on the,
Yeah, in Georgia's same, they can direct market, so they can do sales. So every person that has a lease is also shelf certified, has their own, is a dealer as well. So they're able to market directly and sell directly. So we have a little bit more flexibility in Georgia, which is nice. So they can do either way. So that's one nice thing. But I was going to get back to, as you guys talk about, your seed and holding everything. One thing that I get a lot from growers that are getting into the business is what gears they should start with, or since you guys are established, as new gears come out, how do you guys make that determination if you're going to stick with what you have, change it up? Where's that? How does that play into your farm management?
Ours was, we looked at ours as liability. Um, the long line gear creates a beautiful product. That's what we wanted. But there are recreational boaters in our area, sea doers especially. So we thought, we're going to limit this liability of having lines out of the water and potentially decapitating somebody. And we went with Oyster Grow, and it's been a tremendous product. We have a great relationship with them, and the product's held up. We've got gear on the farm that's 7 years old and still holding up to this day. So we're proud of their gear, and we just made an order this weekend too. So
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Because when you're starting, you're like, you hear about the long line system, about floating bags, floating cages. Even on bottom cages is a newer thing that they've recently allowed us to do in Mississippi. I haven't tried it out yet. But I think it's worth experimenting. And where our farm is located is a very high energy environment. So I thought about going with some of the lighter gear types, and some people have tried and failed, and they just get beat up. It's windy. But looking in the future, if they're going to be building a new reef that's just south of our farm, that's the Katrina Key. If anybody's familiar with Mississippi Sound, it was the old bridge rubble after the Katrina hurricane, and our farm is located right there. It's just like a mile and a half of rubble now, and it has really good wave attenuation. But our farm is in a more exposed area, so we use that high energy with our low stocking density, and it helps shape and clean the oysters. And if I've got a concern of, well, if we lose that wave action, what can we do to kind of put it back in there, because we don't have to tumble as frequently as some other farms because of that. And so it's like, okay, if we lose that wave action, we're going to have to tumble more, or we can go to a lighter gear type that allows more action to get into the oysters.
Jacob, any thoughts on gear?
Right now, all we're using is a 6-bag floating gear. We use both Ketchum and Oyster Grove. Both are great products. I mean, we had a Cat 2 hit us, and both of them did outstanding. During that hurricane, though, we did have to reassess our anchors. So on one side, certain size anchor worked. On our new site, we had to get bigger disc anchors, and I mean, hopefully we'll never have to go through that again. But we know, we're early on in the new farm, so we're fortunate enough to know, like, hey, these ain't gonna work, instead of building out the whole farm with that. So
Yeah, the takeaway is build your farm as storm ready as you can afford at the beginning. So
yes, sir.
Eli, shifting gears a little bit, and from your industry perspective and working with restaurants and chefs, what's the workforce like? And I know that's a challenge for this industry.
Difficult.
Yes. go ahead.
Difficult. I mean, from a workforce standpoint, I know everyone in this room is very proud of their oysters, is getting people to shuck them and care, finding quality shuckers and retaining. I think one of the challenges is understanding that they are a highly skilled, highly specialized member of your kitchen staff, and that they are not, the dishwasher's first graduation out of the dish pit, and paying them commiserately, and understanding that, every single time that they put a knife poorly to an oyster, that is a significant loss of income versus, you know, cutting some parsley incorrectly. It's very challenging, but I think it's also rewiring, restaurateurs to understand that shucking is not a entry level position.
Chris, thoughts on workforce development?
Restaurant side or on my side?
On your side. Stay
It's
in
hard
your
to
lane.
find labor. We're on a peninsula that's 22 miles long. And again, most of the oyster farms are on the western side of the bay, as well as Auburn Shellfish Labs. And, you know, they've got a lot of technicians that work for them in extension and at Shellfish Lab. And we try and steal them over to our side, but it's just difficult to find somebody who's willing to drive 21 miles down a peninsula from a tourism-based town who's making $150 plus a night just serving tables and say, hey, you want to come work in an oyster farm from 7 to 3 every day? And be cold and wet and everything else, but we pay well, so hopefully we'll find somebody to fill some slots that we have.
Yeah, so anybody interested, see Chris. It's
Alabama's beautiful. It's affordable. Come see me. There's a position available right now.
okay, slow down here. Okay. All right, Jacob, workforce and coming from your historic shrimping industry, what's that like now?
Palacios is a fairly small town, so a lot of our workforce is outsourced to H2B or H2A program. We've been working with some of the same families for generations on the shrimp boats and converted a lot of our guys over to oyster farming, and it's been a success. I mean, these guys are awesome. They are truly awesome. We wouldn't be here where we're at without the guys that we have. It really is, you know, a blessing to have them.
And for the owner operator, seasonal help or?
Yeah, so my father works with me. He's over here. It's just really us two that do everything right now. As we're scaling up, I can see we're gonna probably need somebody, one or two in the coming year. So Mississippi's also beautiful, low cost of living. Biloxi's right there. There's casinos. You can have a fun time. But it's an interesting. I know it's going to be an interesting challenge because everybody's been like, it's hard to find people to work. It's hard to find people to work. When it comes down to it, I guess we're going to see what happens.
Awesome. Tom, you have a workforce development program in Georgia yet, or still a little early?
Still early, but it's a question we get from our farmers all the time. And with the way Georgia is, we're spread out. So our farms are along the coastline. Some are more rural areas, some are in urban areas. But I think all of them have difficulty finding that help as they're looking to start expanding. You know, typically they're starting small, family operated, or a couple guys out there. But as they start to grow, you know, it's hitting those growing pains. So we work at it from the backside, trying to get grant funds and stuff like that to develop internship programs. But it's definitely something that would be better to be more robust in our state, and especially as our shrimping industry is shrinking quickly, you know, seeing if there's a way we can tap into that to retool, just like you guys are doing in Texas.
So shifting gears again a little bit, if you're with an extension office, raise your hand. Up high. Up high. All right, so I see Georgia, Louisiana, Auburn, Alabama, Florida. Who's that over there? Oh, Bill. I see RJ, Texas. All right, so the point is, we work for y'all industry. Some of you are aware of us and some of you aren't, but if you go to any of the states, Florida has tremendous products. We all work towards developing products and workshops and information. We are not allowed to advocate, right? So those are industry needs. And so join an association like Paul's here with the NAA, or there's Oyster South, not an advocacy group, but a place to share information. But please join an association because they will do that work for industry that we're not allowed to. We're fans, but we're not allowed to do that. So that's my pitch for the association and for extension. There are good folks there, as you mentioned, Mario, out in Texas, and yeah, let's keep that in mind with the online resources as well. And Tom, did you have your hand raised when I asked? Okay. So, Bill, I think we can, oh, wow.
I've got a,
Oh, man.
Rusty,
Hurrah. Yep.
hold up. I've got a question. And this one's toward
Chris has
Eli.
got, go Chris.
This is a question my partner and I discuss all the time about product availability in the distribution line. So on the Gulf Coast, on the East Coast, we're constantly worried about hurricanes and mortality and other events that could occur and completely wipe us out. Do we take the sale that's at hand, or do we hold on to a portion of that product so that we can trickle it out in the market at any given time? Or should we just sell what we have? That might take us off the distribution line for weeks at a time. So my question to Eli would be, how do you feel as a distributor? If I've got 10,000 oysters and that's my last 10,000, would you rather take 2,500 over the next couple weeks, or would you rather take 10,000 at one time?
I think there's kind of two schools of thought on it. You know, the first is once you've made a menu placement in a restaurant, and once you've got service staff and customers familiar with your product, it's typically bad to lose that. You know, once you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So maintaining the presence is probably good. I do think that there is an argument though to be made of when nobody else has got stuff. If you've got it, you know, you're getting the goods. I personally, you know, having previously been a restaurateur, would have wanted the consistent supply chain. I believe, but I don't think that one shoe fits for all that.
All right, Russ, do you want to take questions then? Is that what you're moving to? I thought that's what you were asking. Are there questions for Rusty and the panelists?
You guys talked a little bit about branding. So each one of you have a company name, and then do you also name your brand of oysters? And if so, is that worth getting trademarked, or you go through all that process?
We have a trademarked oyster at Admiral Shellfish Company, but we're also we're willing to sell off-brand, and we're willing to allow our price to be adjusted at that off-brand as well, because the gentleman yesterday said, you know, if I can sell 10,000 on this off-brand and sell 5,000 with my brand, I'd rather have that fast dime than a slow quarter. Where'd he go? Anyway, yeah. So if I can sell 10,000 as salty goobers, then let them have it.
You know, one thing from our standpoint, I always say, you know, the thing about bad taste is you don't know you have it. So I do say you should be working with your partners, asking what they want in branding. I don't think that anybody should be too scared to do the off brand and those kinds of things. And in terms of trademark, from having gotten cease and desist sent to me before, I strongly recommend it. I think it's good value, but that's just from my side.
So I have a question, and it's a bit of a sensitive topic, but I'm just curious how you guys are navigating situations. You talk about a 6-month crop, which sounds astounding to us on the West Coast. But how are you navigating that kind of situation where you need to relieve your farms and take that pressure off, be able to restock, things like that, during situations like Vibrio vulnificus season? And I'm just curious how that impacts your businesses. And then furthermore, how does that impact the distribution chain when you're bringing in such a wide swath and you have, you know, great relationships down in the Gulf, and then that product gets taken out of the market, replenishing it with new stuff? Is that temporary? Just kind of how that plays out in the Oyster South community.
We've got an excellent extension service. They're constantly monitoring. We have no issues with Vibrio. I do realize it's seasonality, but yeah, until we have that issue, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we haven't had any issues with it, so we're going to keep on rocking on.
I will go ahead. I'll just say, like, I think Washington, Washington actually monitors the waters and closes based on VP and what's in the water, and that's not happening in any other states that I know of that are doing that. It's a very aggressive way to protect public health because you don't know that that's in the oyster, and so time temperature regulations are what all the states have used. And knock on wood, with all the off-bottom oyster farming that's gone on, which means consumption of raw oysters from the southern states has gone way up. We have not seen an increase in illnesses. If anything, I think we've seen a decrease. So the time temperature requirements seem to be working.
Yeah, and back to her question, we got a conditional approved site and a approved site. So they're always testing multiple times, you know, I think twice a month in our bay. So they're always doing tests. So we know if something comes up pretty quick.
Hi, Jim Mine with PMAR. We run the oyster hatchery in Texas. And as a hatchery provider of seed, we get a lot of feedback on the seed, especially if it's not performing well on the farm. And going back to last year's event, we had Hurricane Beryl come in, and we actually saw on surveys a range of mortalities that were up to 80% for a certain farmer. And part of the challenge when you're thinking about how your seed is performing is everyone has slightly different husbandry practices. And I was curious, how often do you sort of look at your oysters? You know, how often are you touching the farm, seeing the oysters, you know, turning, desiccating, you know, if you could speak to that.
This year we've been desiccating once a week, multiple hours, and we are hands-on looking at the product, visually looking at it once a week.
Yeah, comparable. We're out on our farm 4 to 6 days a week. We desiccate, you know, it's like every 6 days really, once a week, you know, you factor in the in and out. And that gets your hands on each individual cage. We flip by hand. Everything that comes up out of the water, you look, you can see, you know, if it's a bigger mesh, smaller mesh, pull a bag, pour it on the table, check just how the oysters are going. And so, I mean, every oyster passes through our hands, we counted like 12 to 15 times from the time we put it in the water until it gets out the door. And that's like physically through our hands, not just like we touch them every day.
6 days a week, roughly. But also our seed suppliers, we'll grab seed from whoever at the prior years, whomever we could get it from. Like I said, South Florida to Mississippi. So we found that certain hatcheries have better genetics and don't take as much work to get it to where we would like to see the oyster, and then also have a better survivability rate. And we have the godfather of the triploid as our neighbor. So we're pretty well set.
Any other questions? I actually do have a question about the branding. I was interested to hear about the idea of off-brand because I have always worried. I was in a country, not the US, where I saw oysters coming in from a farm, coming in on the conveyor belt, and then going into different boxes with different sexy names, exact same oysters, pure branding, all smoke and mirrors. And Eli, you said like you've seen the same oyster in the restaurant. I actually worry about that really degrading the marketplace, because as soon as the consumers find out about that, then why am I paying all this money for these oysters? And so I wonder how you guys deal with that, because like Oyster Master Guild and Julie Chu would rip that to pieces. And so like where do we go with that? Like, to me, I've always said, if I have an oyster that doesn't meet my standards for my name brand, come up with another name. I wouldn't use Salty Goobers, but I would have my premium and I'd have another brand, but they would be distinctive. You would see a difference in those. So I'm just curious if you guys could comment on that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think people are constantly looking for the next cool thing, and that's one of the challenges. You know, there's not a lot of traditionalists in the world anymore who want to stick with the same things. Somebody's saying, I want to see something new. I want a new product. You know, innovation is the word that everybody likes to say. I've never heard somebody say, I'm not a particularly innovative or creative human being, especially in the restaurant industry. So, you know, you're always going to be fighting that. I think also, you know, realizing that, you know, every single thing that you create might not be the biggest success on earth, and not getting too married to an individual brand. Sometimes the branding just doesn't stick. Sometimes the verbiage doesn't stick. Sometimes, you know, the vernacular you used around it might not hit. So if you're moving a ton of your product, that's the hallmark that you don't need to go off brand. If you need other outlets, then that's kind of saying something to it. I agree. You know, I mean, there's some people that would find out that it was the same, you know, the exact same product lose their mind. But, you know, I've definitely seen, Nissan part next to an Infiniti before, really, really similar kind of things. It's branding. It's the world we live in,
I'll just add, I come from telecommunications, and so we all have our cell service, and I worked for AT&T, and we sold network, and it all traverses the same network. We call it white labeling. And so that's just another revenue stream for us. So
It's a tough pill to swallow, Bill, as a farmer. It really is. But at the end of the day, we're trying to move product. And if that's our only option to move that product, then we have to eat that pill. I mean, I'm married to my brand. I love the Admiral Shellfish Company oyster. I think it has a story behind it. If anybody's a history buff, Admiral David Farragut, the Battle of Mobile Bay occurred right off our shores. I mean, that was the largest naval battle in American history. That's where our brand came from. And thanks to Bill, actually, that's why we named it what we did. It is a tough pill to swallow, but inevitably we want to make a living. We want to sell oysters, so sometimes we have to swallow it.
Bob Rowe of East Coast Shellfish Growers is, and I'm sure other people have said it too. You don't make money growing oysters. You make money selling oysters.
Hey everyone, great talk. I'm Fabio with Everglades Oysters, and I kind of lead into this. We are the most southern farm in the continental US and the only one in a tropical climate. So this is kind of a question for inland. How do you deal with the warm water prejudice? And kind of that also ties into like the macroeconomic situation right now with tariffs. In our market, Miami, it's very like PEI and West Coast dominant. I think the opportunity to swoop in and get PEI off the menu and put the Southern oyster on the menu is right now if these tariffs stick. So how do you deal with educating on the warm water prejudice, and how do you feel about the tariffs and swapping out PEI because the time is now?
So I think that we've been working on that prejudice for more than a decade. Anything south of PEI was considered a warm water oyster up until just a few years ago. A lot of that is based upon the awesome work of everybody in this room. People have gotten more comfortable with the idea of a boutique Gulf oyster, not just being, slurped down at a place that you might walk out with a foodborne illness. That's a relatively new thing in the marketplace. So I don't think that prejudice is there anymore. I think that people would be very excited by a unique oyster from a place like that, and there's no longer that stigma amongst our customer base. I think that's an antiquated thinking by any consumer at this point. There's a lot of great education that happens at the restaurant level, and I think that is kind of permutated throughout the industry. In terms of tariffs, it's a real thing. I mean, and this is not meant to be political in any way. Like, it is a real thing. There are prices going up every single day all across our suite of products from other countries. Some farmers do not want to ship out of their countries because they're concerned it's going to show up to the border and a tariff is going to get dropped at that moment. They're not going to be able to move the product. I mean, it's a very, very real concern. I think that this is a time that people should take a lot of pride in domestic seafood. I think that they should take a lot of pride that this is an opportunity to sell products, but I also think that we need to remember that, more ships in the harbor, bring the tide up. We want people to be able to consume everybody's hard work. So I think that it's a good reactionary thing right now. I think that it's important. But people are sensitive to tariffs. I do think the PEI the prices are going to continue to go up for the foreseeable future. But I don't know if you're going to be able to displace somebody who really loves a Beausoleil with something else. I do think that there is enough cachet with those products.
This is like an industry, it's a sales industry where we as the farmer have to sell our own product. I've been all over the Southeast, as far west as Houston and Dallas and that area, as far north as Ohio, as far east as the East Coast, trying to push my own product. And then I relate back to the inland or the distributor and say, hey guys, send them this product. There's no other industry where a farmer goes out. I mean, you look at a row crop, it's a commodity market, maybe turf sales. I was having this discussion with another farm this morning. It's tough. It's very difficult to sell your own product because that means time away from the farm. That means time away from family. and their costs go up because you're constantly traveling. But this is an interesting industry in that aspect that we are putting our face out there as well as our product and trying to sell our product. So it's an interesting industry.
Sure, I think this is really for Eli. Can you tell us something about how much packaging plays a role in your ability to move our product?
Yeah.
Whether it's boxes, bags?
Absolutely. Huge shift to more and more sustainable packaging every day. That is a touch point. That is a sell point. When we tell somebody that it's biodegradable, it's recyclable, all those things, that's a big boon. You know, I would want to really chime with my warehouse guys before I got too into this, but boxes stack. That's a good thing. Boxes stack on pallets. They don't, you know, seep as much stuff all over the floor and all that. Like boxes, I think are a very good thing. It also presents really well to the customer. It comes, it shows up, it's got branding on the outside. I think that's a more positive for sure.
All right. Yeah. Go
They
ahead.
can, but they don't stack as well. Yeah.
All right, soup.
I agree with you on boxes. You know, our oysters are growing so fast, they're thin shelled. And if you put them in a sack, people tend to throw them around like they're rocks. And they're going to chip, they're going to bleed, and the shelf life is going to go down.
Yeah.
All right, with that, I want to thank the panelists for their time and for our moderators, Tom and Rusty. Thank you guys.